Hello, I'm Dr. Jerry Scheidbach. I pastor Lighthouse Baptist Church in Santa Maria, California, and I'm your brain masseur. Get ready for your brain massage. Memo Mania. In this session with the brain masseur, I'm going to walk you through that memo and explain it to you thoroughly. This is going to be very, very informative. I think you'll enjoy it if you're interested in learning the backstory to all of this and the important insights to certain language used in that memo and so on. All right. First off, let's address the process that's involved in declassifying a top secret document for public release. And this will go to the allegations, mainstream media, mostly stupid media, or Marxist socialist media, take your pick. The links they've gone to try to spin this whole thing as Trump acting against the advice of those who are leading the important departments of the FBI and the Department of Justice. And they're trying to give you the idea that he's running out as a renegade and just sort of throwing this out there carelessly or irresponsibly. First, it is true that the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, has done an admirable job as FBI director thus far. And he did object to the memo release. One claim is that he believes there might be material facts omitted from the memo. I didn't hear him say that. I couldn't find any place that he did, but that's what some are saying. And the rebuttal to that has been, well, then bring them up, bring it out. Let's see it. Show your hand, show your cards. I, for one, would like to see any truth, any facts that will contribute to my understanding of the truth about this whole mess. And so the fact that they don't bring it out, you'll see as we go further into this. So, to use the specter of omitted facts, the libtards can create enough smoke, they hope, to obscure the memo's revelations about political intrigue at the highest levels of our government, to interfere with an election, and to violate the liberties, the constitutionally protected rights of American citizens, because that's what's at stake here. Another theory is that he wants to protect the reputation of the FBI that he serves and the many fine men and women who work in that department that should not be painted with the broad stroke of suspicion over what some of the Obama bots did during his tenure in those offices. And I would agree with that. So, draining the swamp, however, requires the exposure of all the muck that is in it. A quiet behind-the-scenes cleanup is not what is in order here. It's not what's needed. But then there's this. It is difficult for civilians, those of us outside the system who don't swim in the swamp. It's hard for us to understand or even appreciate the internal dynamics of the swamp. So allow me to enlighten or to at least throw a bit of light on this. There are some Republicans who simply believe that the best way to proceed in this matter is to let Mueller probe it out and just do his job, and because he's not going to find anything anyway, just let it go. And they are afraid that Trump can be, by these actions, made to look like he's attempting to undercut the investigation. But my friend, they're going to try to make Trump look like that no matter what he does. Many Republicans are afraid of the media. Let's just cut to the chase here, shall we? A lot of Republicans, particularly among the aristos, the gopers, they are afraid of the media and they are intimidated by them. And they fear what the power the media has to shape their image to their constituents. Now, what's refreshing about Trump is he does not seem to be intimidated by these people at all. And I think that these aristos should take a lesson from the Trumpster here, okay? Now, I'm in favor of honest, non-political, get to the business of the state, get it done approach, and I find Trump's willingness to challenge such nonsense to be refreshing. All right? Thank God for it. And I would that the rest of the Republicans understand that enough Americans get it now. Their perceptions are not so much controlled by the media as might have been the case some years ago. Those in government charged with the responsibility of taking care of our government secrets, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, voted to disclose that memo to the public. And that's making the libtards crazy. And they're mad at Paul Ryan, accusing him for failing to exercise his responsible use of influence and authority to step in and intervene in this. Oh, on and on and on it goes. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, and because this is why you listen in to the Brain Masseur, for the backstory, the in-depth analysis, the information that provides an understanding of context, let me dig into this a little bit with you. The House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence is chaired by Nunez, who is a representative of the California and of the 22nd District particularly. Here's a quick lesson on why elections matter and why the upcoming midterm election matters a lot. All right? The majority party chairs and dominates the appointment of seats in these committees. If Hillary had been elected, you would never have seen this memo, I assure you. There's no way it would ever have seen the light of day. Therefore, right now, the Republicans are the majority and they control this committee, and that is the reason we get to see this memo. Friend, there are 13 Republicans and 9 Democrats on this committee, and the committee is chargeable for overseeing the intelligence communities. Now, what that tells you is that this committee oversees the intelligence community and their activities on behalf of the American people, not on behalf of the intelligence community. Okay? In other words, it's not the job of this oversight committee to protect the FBI. It's not their job to protect the Department of Justice or their reputation. Their job is to protect the interests of the American people from potential abuses perpetrated upon their rights and their liberties by these various departments of government that handle something so sensitive as intelligence. They protect us, my friend, not them. You read that response by the Democrats to the release of this memo, and you get the very clear idea that their concern is with protecting the FBI. Their concern is with protecting the Department of Justice. No, that's not the job of that committee. The job of that committee is to protect your interests and mine. The vote to release the memo went right down party lines. The Republicans voted to approve it. The Democrats opposed it. The minority issued a statement, that would be the Democrats on that committee, issued a statement of disapprobation or disapproval. But in that statement, and I read it thoroughly, they offer nothing at all in the way of facts to support their allegation that the only reason Republicans wanted this memo released was to undermine the ongoing Mueller investigation. That's the way they're spinning this. But they offer no proof to support that. The minority response makes audacious claims that there are material facts omitted from this memo that, quote, impact its accuracy, end quote. Really? Well, where are they? Why didn't you stipulate them? Why didn't you at least make some kind of documented? Why didn't you make some kind of a reference to some documentation supporting that allegation? None. Essentially, the minority says the Republicans created the memo and released it for purely partisan reasons. So we're to believe that the minority in the Permanent House Select Committee on Intelligence, that is the Democrats, are full of virtue. And that the majority members, Republicans, are full of nefarious ne'er-do-wells whose interest is to impugn the FBI and the DOJ. That's interesting. You talk about partisan politics. But the indisputable fact is this. The memo simply relates what was presented or represented in the FISA applications. The documents for application to the FISA court to get a warrant to spy on American citizens, violating their Fourth Amendment rights. The memo relates to us the facts as they are documented in the FISA applications. Do you understand that? That's a very important thing to keep in mind here. For the minority to say, quote, the majority suggests that the FBI failed to alert the court as to Mr. Steele's potential political motivations or the political motivations of those who hired him, end quote. And to respond to that by simply saying, quote, ready? Here's what they have to offer to support this allegation that you just made. You ready for it? Here it is. Quote, but this is not accurate, end quote. I tell you what, they're depending way too much upon their presumed credibility. I'm sure that kind of thing is going to satisfy all who already believe what they believe about all this. Those who accept implicitly the integrity of the Democrat responders here. But I'm not convinced that Nunez, California 22nd District Representative, Conway, representative from Texas, King, by the way, representative of New York, who by the way, Republican, yes, but who could hardly be regarded as a Trumpophile. Not even. He resisted Trump's tax plan. I understand that it was King who made the motion to release the memo. What? The Gowdy, a South Carolina representative, Hurd, another Texas representative, Turner, Ohio representative. I mention these guys, not the rest, because I don't know the others. I don't know of the others, but at least these men, I have some idea of their reputation for being honest, forthright men of honor. But the Democrats can just, broad stroke sweep everybody as having these bad motivations and ill motivations. And I hope you're paying attention. Adam Schiff, the ranking member who probably ought to get out of there. He's been there too long. He's already stinking with the smell of the swamp. And the rest of those Democrats, they are to be perceived as pure as the wind-driven snow. Give me a break here. At the very least, the motivation of those who opposed releasing this memo are every bit as suspect as those who approved its release. Wouldn't that be a fair statement? And so, in other words, we must depend upon the indisputable facts represented in this memo. And the fact is, this memo is constructed entirely from what is found documented in the FISA applications. That, my friend, is something you need to remember. If there are other material facts supporting these applications, well, why weren't they included in the application? Start thinking with me here. You understand? So, okay, Dems, I'm for releasing all related documents, for getting all the facts to the American people. And I haven't heard any of the Republicans say otherwise. The Dems are on record that their biggest concern here is the damage this is doing to the reputation of the FBI and the DOJ. I'm concerned about the damage it's doing to the liberties and rights of the American people. But Adam Schiff considers the damage this has done to the FBI to be his greatest concern. That's what he said in his response to the release of this memo. So apparently the Dems believe releasing any further information about this to the public would only serve to further damage the image of the FBI and DOJ, because they're not even asking for any other documentation they claim or insinuate is available to be released. Holding government accountable, including the FBI and the DOJ, is exactly what this committee is charged to do. It's their job. I mean, it's the very definition of what it is they're supposed to be doing. Their job is to protect our liberties from encroachment by an overreaching government. All right? So this top secret memo was duly disclosed according to law, not carelessly or foolishly. The same type of thing was done during Obama's administration, by the way, and during Bush's administration also. Trump, furthermore, quote, directed lawyers and national security staff to assess the declassification request, consistent with established standards governing the handling of classified information, including those under Section 3.1D of Executive Order 13526. Now, those documents lay out the rules that provide for declassification of top secret information when, quote, the public interest in disclosure outweighs any need to protect that information, end quote. Trump's review of the declassification request also included input, quote, from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Justice. And this would be a good place to note that while Schiff implies in his response to the release of this memo that the DOJ objects to the memo's release, the fact is Sessions, who's head of the Department of Justice, did not object, but as a matter of fact said, quote, no department is perfect, end quote. Sessions promised to address concerns raised by the memo, and I trust he will do that. Furthermore, it's important to note that the memo includes a little caveat here and to understand properly what that caveat says to us. It includes this statement, quote, the memo reflects the judgments of its congressional authors, end quote. Well, it's very fair and honest to put that in there. And I'm pleased with the integrity of Paul Ryan and company in putting this out. In other words, included in the stipulation of facts that are presented in this memo are the takeaway of its authors. All right? The takeaways, mind you, that you'll see any reasonable mind would deduce from the evidence presented, the facts stipulated in this memo. Now, warranted, the opinions expressed in this memo are matters for further inquiry. And we would expect our Department of Justice head, Mr. Jeff Sessions, to do due diligence in running all of this down to ground, and we expect he will do that. But as we proceed to go through this memo, you're going to see why someone would say, for example, an opinion. It appears those presenting these FISA applications purposely misdirected the court. An opinion that you will see is fully justified when you examine the array of facts that virtually compel any reasonable mind to that conclusion. Republican Nunez is the author of the memo, along with some others who had input. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And my friend, there's no more reason to assume his memo reflects political bias than there is to assume that those who object to its being released do so solely on the basis of their own political bias. In other words, that mudslinging doesn't work here because we've got the hard evidence in the FISA application. And that's the information we're interested in. So now the purpose of the memo. It's to update members, that is Congress, on significant facts relating to the committee's ongoing investigation into the DOJ and the FBI and their use of FISA and the FISA court, during the 2016 presidential cycle. And then they offer a summary. And in that summary, they say a summary of our findings. The memo relates discoveries that raise concerns with the legitimacy and the legality of certain DOJ and FBI interactions with the FISA court, and that represent a troubling breakdown of legal processes established to protect the American people from abuses related to the FISA process. And then the memo provides the following update. Now, as I present this update, I'm going to include information not stipulated in the memo, just so you understand it better. For example, when I read on October 21, 2016, I will insert, that is, during Obama's presidency. You get the idea? So you'll have proper context and so on. So I'll read it like this. On October 21st, 2016, Obama's DOJ and FBI sought and received a FISA probable cause order. Okay? And then this also. It goes on to say, in parentheses, not under Title VII, in parentheses or closing parentheses. Now, when I come across something like that, you might not know what it's referring to. So you're here to get educated. I'm going to help you. So when I come to something like this, I'm going to explain what Title VII is. For example, in this case, take Title VII, and its reference here in context refers to the FISA Amendments Act that details rules that govern surveillance activities of foreign powers operating within the United States. So, the application was not a Title VII issue, but rather, and this is important, it was one that, quote, authorized electronic surveillance on Carter Page. Now I'll add Carter Page. Who's that? Well, Carter Page is a U.S. citizen, my friend, a private United States citizen, an American oil industry consultant, and former foreign policy advisor to Trump during his campaign. So the FISA warrant is to surveil a private United States citizen. And it was not granted under Title VII provisions and concerns, but rather an exceptional rule that allows the government to surveil a private American citizen, to spy on us. And this warrant was obtained by the Obama FBI and the Obama DOJ from the Obama FISA court. And by the way, FISC, when you read that in the memo, refers to the FISA court. Now, are you with me so far? All right. If you don't want this sort of in-depth understanding of this memo, well, you know, what can I say? And I don't mean this critically, but you can get all the superficial overview pablum you want available to you in the mainstream media and then most of the talk shows and so on like this as well. You'll understand better as I move along here. You really need to really understand this memo. It is really, really important. What I hope you get is that what I'm doing here provides the best possible basis for ascertaining the merit of this memo and provides sufficient information to guard you against being deceived into dismissing the relevance and the importance of this memo by some superficial comments. You know, the kind of argument that sounds plausible, a specious argument we call it, but when it's examined in the light of all the facts, it's exposed as an outright lie. Well, the mainstream media are already trying to do that right now with their smoke and mirrors game. This kind of in-depth analysis of the memo will help you and help you help others. All right, so the request here had to be certified by Director Comey or by Deputy Director of the FBI, and that was McCabe. Then it had to receive the approval of the Attorney General, and that was Loretta Lynch. The Deputy Attorney General, or the Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, and later Rosenstein, or the Senate confirmed Assistant Attorney General for the National Security Division, which would be, at that time, John P. Carlin. Now, these people aren't named here, just the offices, but those are the players in those positions at the time this was done. The FBI and the DOJ, quote, obtained one initial FISA warrant targeting Carter Page and 3 FISA renewals from the FISA court. Now, this is very important. In case you don't know, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but FISA refers to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. A FISA warrant is one that is approved by the FISA court under that law. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court empowers the government to conduct surveillance, in this case, on an American citizen. Now, such warrants must be renewed every 90 days. That's kind of a layer of protection that's built into this to protect our rights from a government that's just going wild and trying to spy on our own people, like they did in communist Russia, like they do in communist China. Anyway, furthermore, every renewal, listen, must be supported by a separate finding. You can't just use the same findings that got you the first 90 days. You got to come up with another finding that justifies continuing the surveillance. That's all important. And it's interesting to us because every one of these warrants was obtained with the same information. The now infamous phony dossier. So the applications had to come up with some kind of specious argument for separate finding. Otherwise, they would have been shut down after only 90 days. All right, my friend. Now, James Comey signed 3 of these FISA applications on behalf of the FBI, and Deputy Director McCabe signed 1 of them. All of these applications depended almost entirely upon the information that was given or provided in this dossier. Sally Yates, Dana Buente, and Rod Rosenstein each signed 1 or more FISA or FISA apps on behalf of the Obama DOJ. Now, here's another important point. Because this FISA court has the power to suspend Fourth Amendment protections of the United States citizens, it is supposed to be reserved only for extraordinary circumstances established by credible evidence of a real and present danger to the security of the United States of America, and not to support some political witch hunt. And therefore, the people must suppose and must have a presumption that there will be due diligence on the part of that court before they empower the FBI or the DOJ to start spying on you and on me. I hope you're getting what this is really about here. Now, I question the due diligence aspect of that FISA court. It's not been brought up yet, but I have some serious questions here. For example, just how scrupulous was that court in examining the evidence set before it? Did they bother to ask any questions to vet and establish the credibility of this so-called evidence to support a warrant to encroach upon the Fourth Amendment protections of a private citizen of this country? What did the court perceive qualified as a separate finding each time this thing was renewed? I think that's important information for us to know. There's a question in my mind of duplicity on the part of the court in this matter that needs to be looked into. One of Obama's judges, perhaps? All right, nevertheless, the court is dependent, I understand this, it is, yes, dependent on the good faith of those presenting evidence supporting their request for warrant. Now, here's another important rule that governs this business of approving a FISA application. The rule of full disclosure requires that the presentation of information to the court that is potentially favorable to the target of the FISA application, in this case, Carter Page, that information, it is obligatory upon the FBI or upon those making application. It's their obligation to present that information also, full disclosure. In the case of Carter Page, the government had at least 4 independent opportunities before the FISA court to accurately provide an accounting of the relevant facts. However, our findings indicate that, as described below, material and relevant information was omitted, quote unquote. That's from the memo. Now, among these omissions, the following. First, quote, the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application, end quote. Yeah. The Obama FBI and the Obama DOJ, they knew that Steele had been paid over $160,000 by the DNC and the Clinton campaign using a law firm, Perkins Coie, that represented Hillary and her campaign, and a research firm called Fusion GPS. These people were employed to obtain derogatory information on Donald Trump and his ties to Russia. And yet, none of the FISA applications disclosed this to the court. Now, let those Democrats squirm and whine and squeal like stuck pigs all they might. The bottom line is, this information is not in the documentation. They didn't put it in the FISA application. So, why didn't they? Were they purposely shielding this information from the eyes of the court? Or did they not want this information documented in the application in order to provide cover for the court? But we know that the DNC and Clinton participation in the creation of this dossier was known by the Obama administration, but kept out of the FISA application. And I don't think it's very likely that that was a mere oversight. Interestingly, the FISA application did disclose that Steele was working for, quote, a named U.S. person, end quote. What does that tell you? That tells you that there was a presence of mind on the question, who was Steele working for, in preparation of this dossier, right? Obviously, that was a question that was present in the mind of the person making this application to the FISA court. Why not name the person? Why not name Glenn Simpson? Why not name Fusion GPS? It's interesting, isn't it? Why not bring out the fact they knew and were obviously thinking about at the time they made the application? Why not bring out the fact that they knew Steele was working for Hillary? Although Obama's administration knew they did not name Fusion GPS, although Obama's administration knew they did not name Glenn Simpson, who was paid by U.S. law firm Perkins Coie representing the DNC and Hillary Clinton campaign, even though this was known by the DOJ and the FBI, the Obama DOJ and the Obama FBI, even though they knew these things, they didn't disclose it in any document. It certainly was not documented in the FISA application. We must therefore assume it was purposely hidden from the eyes of the court. That's an opinion derived from the facts that someone like Jeff Sessions needs to run down. The Carter Page FISA application as support for their FISA warrant requests cited extensively. September 23, 2016 Yahoo News article by a Michael Isikoff. It was a real popular article. I remember reading it and circulating. It reported on a trip allegedly made by Carter Page in 2016 into Moscow. And the article advanced by innuendo that this was a Trump-Russia collusion trip. However, it turns out this news story was leaked to Yahoo News by Steele. Oh. So it was not independent corroboration of Steele's dossier or any concerns raised by that dossier. Steele was the source for this. Can anyone spell conspiracy? You know, none dare call it conspiracy, right? The FISA app does not make this disclosure, although those preparing the application, the FISA app, knew the truth about all of these things. In fact, the FISA application, quote, incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News, end quote. Now, because the FISA application does not spell out the reason for bringing this fact in this article into view in that application, those weasels, those snakes in the Democratic Party, wiggle and squirm about, finding every little crack they can to throw a shadow of doubt over all of this. And so the minority response dismisses this allegation as unfounded, saying the FISA application does not present the illusion to the article as support for Steele's dossier. Well, that's very strange then, because we have to ask, why was it mentioned? Why did you bring it up? What else could be the reason for it to be present in that FISA application, except as corroborating concerns raised in the dossier? These people are just amazing. Why refer to the article at all unless it has something to do with the application? And that then to provide the court with some reason to believe the allegations of the dossier had some relevance and some credibility. Yet Steele has admitted that he met with Yahoo News in British court filings, along with several other news outlets, by the way. And he did so at the direction, it turns out, of his employer, Fusion GPS, under employment to Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Oh, good night. Furthermore, Perkins Coie, Clinton's representatives, was aware of Steele's initial media context because they hosted at least one of them themselves in Washington, D.C. with Steele and Fusion GPS. Good night. And when this became public knowledge, well, then Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source. And the cause was stipulated that it was of the most serious of violations, an unauthorized disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in an October 30, 2016 Mother Jones article by David Korn. Now, why did they choose the October article by David Korn and not refer back to those unauthorized revelations that took place in September? Yeah. Well, listen, the FBI and the DOJ should have already known about Steele's leaks to the press because they were going on as early as September. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September, before the Page application was even submitted to the FISA court in October. Why not reveal this to the FISA court? If Steele had been terminated before the FISA application had been filed, well, that would have obviously undermined Steele's dossier. And everything depended upon that dossier. Make no mistake about that. But Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI, federal offenses, by the way, prison time here, about all these contacts. Curious that Clinton's representatives knew and arranged one of these forays with the press between Fusion GPS and Mr. Steele. So the FBI, it would seem, it's just beyond credibility to think that they wouldn't know about this. Or certainly they failed to do due diligence. All of this makes Steele an unreliable source, of course, and that's been pretty well brought out. Now get this, before and after Steele was terminated, he continued to have a connection with the Department of Justice. That's right, they continued in communication with him even after he was terminated. And they did that through the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Bruce Orr, who is a senior DOJ official who worked closely with Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates and later Rod Rosenstein in the Obama DOJ. Bruce Orr, and by that I mean even when Trump came in, it was still the Obama DOJ until we got Comey anyway. And you know that Fusion GPS was hired by Clinton and the DNC to cultivate opposition research on Trump on behalf of the Hillary campaign. Now, this relationship between Orr and the Department of Justice, of course, and his connection as something of a liaison between him and terminated Christopher Steele gets more interesting when you learn that his wife, that is Mr. Orr's wife, was an employee of Fusion GPS. And in the memo, it says, quote, "This information was inexplicably concealed from the FICS." And now, my friend, this relationship between Orr's wife and Steele and Fusion GPS was, quote, inexplicably concealed from the FISC, that is the FISA court. Now think about that. First, my friend, if the application failed to put this information in front of the FISA court, but did inform the court of these things in other documents or in oral testimony, well, we need to investigate that court, because that judge needs to be brought forward to testify why a warrant, which effectively violates the Fourth Amendment protections of a United States citizen, would be approved on such specious, unverified, unfounded allegations. Why would that court do this? You understand that court is specifically charged with the responsibility to stand as a watchdog for our liberties against government encroachment. That's what they're there for. That's the reason you go to the court to get the warrant, is so the court can look at that and go, wait a minute here. Is that really justified? Well, that court failed to do its due diligence, or it's complicit in the conspiracy. My friend, if these material facts were not included in the FISA application and not otherwise revealed to the court, well, what does that tell you? You see, in other words, these guys, this memo nails them any way they try to turn on this. According to the head of FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial Page FISA application, Carter Page. All right, now, according to the head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial Carter Page FISA warrant application. In other words, it had not been verified, it had not been vetted, it had not been corroborated. They had only begun to run down sources and so forth. But the DOJ and the FBI, Obama's DOJ, Obama's FBI, went forward to the FISA court anyway with this application. And so once again, why didn't the court, whose primary responsibility is to check the FISA application for credibility, why didn't this Obama court do its job? Can anyone spell conspiracy? Or certainly dereliction of duty? And the reason is obvious to me. It was a conspiracy to conduct a coup against the electorate of the United States of America. To do with the general election what Hillary Clinton's minions managed to do to Bernie Sanders in their primary. Crooks. Comey saw the dossier and at one point testified that the dossier was, quote, salacious and unverified, end quote. We have no evidence it was thereafter verified. They can't even verify it today. In fact, it's been debunked. And yet Comey cited this dossier as the basis for his FISA application. Phony, baloney, Comey. You understand where I come up with that? Are you hearing this? We are talking about conspiracy to conduct a coup of the American government. Deputy Director McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. They had nothing else. You understand that? They had nothing else. In other words, the only case they had was whatever they can make out of that dossier. An unverified political hit piece bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. And then fed, by the way, to Steele by Russian operatives. Yeah, this game they're playing, pretending that there's some big rift between Russia and the DNC. What a bunch of nonsense. Those guys have been connected at the hip. I mean, going all the way back to Kennedy and before him, and to Khrushchev and so on. This party has always been very favorably leaning toward communists right along the way. I mean, you just check the history and you'll see it. You had Ted Kennedy conspiring with the Russians. against Ronald Reagan. Yeah. You've got Obama saying to, who was the guy? I forget. Was it Medved? I think so. Saying, let Putin know that after I'm elected, well, I'll have a lot more room to do this and that. He didn't know he was off. He didn't know he was on mic then, did he? Why would a president of the United States be asking, literally pleading for a little time from Putin? No, they're trying to make you think that it's Trump Putin, when all along it's Hillary Obama Putin. And now, as we move toward conclusion, to add insult to egregious, grievous injury, this memo concludes by revealing that the Page FISA application mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, when there is not now, nor was there ever, any evidence supporting any cooperation between these two, or any conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. Beyond the fact that they happened to both work on the same campaign. But no evidence beyond that was presented. Nevertheless, this information was used to trigger the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July of 2016 by FBI agent Pete Strzok. And remember Strzok? I'm sure you've heard about the Strzok Mistress Lisa texts that, quote, reflect extensive discussions about the investigation. Listen, orchestrating leaks to the media, and include a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss an insurance policy against President Trump's election. Can anybody spell conspiracy? All right. That about covers it, beyond what I might like to bring out, stipulating that Steele's sources were primarily Russian operatives. But that's another video. Anyway, those who were concerned, and I was one of them, that this memo hype was being maybe overhyped, and I was concerned it might come out to be more fizzle than sizzle. Well, all fears of that are gone. It turns out, my friend, this thing is sizzling hot. It's sizzling, spitting hot. The fat has hit the pan and burst into flames. Now, the question is, what will Sessions do with all this? He promised to run it down. Well, we do have hope. God bless you. God bless America. And I'll see you in church.